Giovanni Davis, and I am a student in the Project Next Generation program at the Kankakee Public Library. Today is the October 11, 2016, and I am at the Mantino Veterans Home in Mantino, Illinois, interviewing the U.S. military veteran. So we'll start with the first question. When and where were you born?
Where was I born?
Yes.
I was born in Italy. I had three brothers. They were born in Chicago. My mother went back to Italy, and that's when I was born, in Italy.
I was born in Chicago.
Because her mother died, that's why she went back to Italy.
1923.
And that's when my dad came, and that's when I was born in Italy. I came back to America when I was 9. Now I'm 92.
My mother worked for the telephone.
I fought 2 years in Europe, and I fought 2 years in the Pacific. 2 years I was on the USS Brooklyn, a light cruiser. I bombarded. I went overseas in 1942, November the 5th. November the 11th, we hit North Africa, Casablanca, Oran, Algiers, Palermo, Sicily, Naples, Italy, Anjou, Italy, and southern France. Then the women propagandism, they announced that they sunk us. We went back to Gibraltar. We hit there for a whole month, making them believe that they sunk us, but they didn't. Then we went back and we bombed North France. We knocked off their shore batteries, and then they brought their tanks, and we knocked their tanks out. And then it became 2 years I spent in Europe. And then I volunteered to go to the Pacific. I went to the Pacific for 2 years. I became an underwater demolition team. They call themselves Navy SEALs today. I swam in enemy harbors and blew up their ships. I spent 2 years in Europe and 2 years in the Pacific.
What are your parents' names and what were their occupations?
My dad's name was Peter Colonna. And my mother was Josephina. They're both dead. My three brothers were dead. They're dead. I'm the only one left. Charlie was in the Army. Joe was in the Navy on a supply ship. Johnny died when he was 10 years old with diarrhea. And I'm Nick. I was the youngest one. And I'm 92 now. Going on 93.
Do you have any siblings and what are their names if so?
Who?
Do you have any siblings and what are their names or so?
Scissors?
Siblings like family members and children.
Oh, I have 2 daughters and I have 2 granddaughters. 2 grandchildren. My granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter is Pamela Lynn Cole. She's a lawyer. She used to be a lawyer in Chicago. She went on vacation in the Caribbean. She moved there. She's been there 31 years now. She takes all cases. She's a lawyer. She takes all cases except divorces. She won't take divorces, but she takes all other cases. And she has 4 clerks working for her. And she has a five-room office in the Virgin Islands. And she has a home built halfway up the mountain. I used to go there in the wintertime when it was here. I used to go there, and it was nice and warm there in the summer. Here in the winter, it was warm there. And then I spent 2 years in Europe, and then I went to the Pacific. And I became an underwater demolition team. They called themselves Navy SEALs. I spent 2 years in Europe and 2 years in the Pacific. I became an underwater demolition team. I swam in Henry Harbors and blew up the ships.
Did any of your siblings serve in the military?
Pardon?
Did any one of your siblings serve in the military?
Did I serve in Medicare?
No, like, did any one of your family members serve in the military?
How did I return? By train.
My mother died when she was 46, 40. She died when she was 44.
How did they treat you when you came back?
And
Whoa,
I was 6 years old.
great.
I remember it.
How did you adjust to civilian life?
Okay.
What were your what were you doing before you had entered the service?
With or
Pardon?
What were you doing before you had entered the U.S. military service?
What I was doing?
Yes.
I worked for the railroad. When I came home from the war, I hired out in the U.S. Steel. I only worked 1 week there and they went out on strike. My dad was alive then and he says, get yourself out of the mill.
Yeah, mechanical
They're always
drawing
striking,
for contract.
the U.S. Steel. Then I went to the railroad.
service impacted your feelings about
The railroad, I hired out on the railroad
Well, I didn't like.
and I drove trains. But everything was
You
wrong.
better- you never
The
had
engines
one.
were steam engines. I shoveled a lot of coal, and I used to take trains from Chicago to Fort
Well,
Wayne,
you do
Indiana.
what you have to do.
And which branch
When
did you
you're
serve
in the
in?
army,
Pardon?
or when you're a civilian, you're
And which
drafted. or you
branch
join,
you served
you have to
in?
do
Like,
what
as in
you're
what team you was
supposed to
on?
do.
What, you mean
What military branch you served in?
in the military?
No,
What branch I was serving?
Yes.
Well, in Europe, I served on the USS Brooklyn, a
B-17,
light cruiser,
Flying Fortress.
1,200 men and
That was a
officers.
waste time.
And I was down to the bottom of the ship, sliding out power shells. And I walk across, throw them to the hoist, send them up to the shell deck. Our armor piers were a foot high.
It's a bomber.
They weighed 105 pounds. They went in first, my power shell went behind them, and
Yeah, we had
we-
targets. So we
I was on the
had
USS
to
Brooklyn,
each day
a light
fly
cruiser.
target. Fly over the-
It had 5 turrets. You know what a gun turret is?
Yeah.
It turns around, and each turret had 3 6-inch
Well, it's
barrels.
all Europe.
So that was 15 6-inch barrels.
Yeah.
And the rest of them were all 20 millimeters for anti-aircraft fire.
Did you enlist on going to the military, or were you drafted?
No,
Pardon?
Did you enlist on going to the U.S., or were you drafted?
I volunteered.
gentlemen,
I volunteered for everything in World War II.
Yes.
might
So you
be
enlisted.
500 pounds.
I was 18 years old and I volunteered for
Different
everything.
places. Depends on the target.
Why did you choose the specific branch of the military
Well,
that you were in?
very
Pardon?
few.
Why did you choose the specific branch of the military that you were in?
No,
Well, I finished 2 years in Europe. And then I went to the Pacific. When I went to the Pacific, I became an underwater demolition team. I swam in enemy harbors and blew up their ships.
In this closing, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to interview you.
And I'm lucky that I came back alive.
I was proud to do it.
Will
Thank
you
you.
tell me about when you were departed for a training camp and your training camp experience?
Thank you. Okay.
When I,
Would you tell me about when you were departed for a training camp and your training camp experience?
no, I volunteered for everything. They didn't,
Thank you.
they didn't do nothing for me. I went
Kiss your hand to
2
that.
years in Europe and 2 years in the Pacific.
Yeah.
I'm all on my own.
Do you recall your instructions? If so, what were they like?
What?
Do you recall your instructions? If so, what were they like?
What is that? What does that mean?
Do you recall your instructions, like the instructions that they gave you? If so, what were they like?
Oh, they were great. They were great. They served me right. I have a letter from President Truman.
Yeah.
The President of the United States sent me a letter. I have it at home. I have it here, posted down in my room. If you care to read it.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it up. The letter I got from President Truman is posted in my room downstairs, down in my room here. If you want to read it, I'll get it.
What kinds of friendships did you form while serving, and with whom?
The who?
What kinds of friendships did you form while serving in the U.S. military, and with whom?
What kind of friend?
Yeah, like the friendship, like as in who did you meet in there while you were serving in the military, and who?
Well, I spent 2 years aboard the USS Brooklyn, a light cruiser in Europe. I went overseas in 1942. November the 11th, 6 days later, we hit North Africa, Casablanca, Oran, Algiers, Palermo, Sicily, Naples, Italy, Anzio, Italy, and southern France. We bombarded all them places. And then they have women propagandism, and they announced that they sunk us. We went to Gibraltar, and we laid there for a whole month, making them believe that they sunk us. Then we went back to France. We bombarded shore France. We knocked off their shore batteries, and then they brought their tanks. We knocked off their tanks. And then I volunteered for the Pacific. I spent 2 years in Europe and 2 years in the Pacific. In the Pacific, I became an underwater demolition team. They call themselves Navy SEALs. I swam in enemy harbors and blew up their ships.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
How did I?
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home while you were serving in the military?
Well, my mother died when I was 6 years old.
What?
She died, she was 44, and I was 6 years old. Then I had my dad, and my brother Charlie was in the Army. Joe was in the Navy on a supply ship. Johnny died when he was 10 years old with diarrhea. And I was the youngest one. I was the baby. And they're all dead now. I'm the only one that's alive out of my family, my mother and dad's family. I have 2 daughters and I have 2 grandchildren. My oldest daughter, she graduated college and she's a lawyer. She takes all cases except divorces.
Yeah.
She used to be a lawyer in Chicago. She went on vacation in the Caribbean. She moved out there. She's been there 31 years. She takes all cases except divorces. She won't take divorces, but she handles all other cases. And my other daughter lives in Cedar Lake. She graduated high school, but she didn't want to go to college. But her husband is a college man.
Yeah.
They live in Cedar Lake, Indiana.
Yeah.
What did you do for recreation and What did you do for recreation or when you were off duty?
What did I do for recreation and
Or when you was off duty?
was off duty?
Yes.
Oh, I bowled in bowling alleys, and I went out with friends,
Yes.
and I used to go to special movies, and I used to enjoy myself in life because all my brothers were gone. My wife died. I was married in 1950. I met my wife in 1950. And we were married 64 years. She died 2 years ago. And I'm 92 today. I'm going on 93. And I have 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren. My oldest daughter is a lawyer.
Yes.
She takes all cases except divorces. And she's in the Virgin Islands. She used to be a lawyer in Chicago. She went on vacation in the Caribbean. She liked it there. She moved there. She's been there about 32 years now. She takes all cases except divorces.
Where were you when the war ended or your tour of duty ended?
When the war ended, I came back and I hired out in U.S. Steel, United States Steel Mill. And they went out on strike in a week's time. So my dad was alive. He says, get yourself out of the mills and get yourself a job on a railroad, which I did. There was 30 different railroad companies then. Now there are only 7. But I retired from the Norfolk and Southern with 37 years.
How did you return home?
Pardon?
How did you return home from the military?
How did I retire?
How you return home?
How I returned home
Yes.
from the war?
Yes.
On a ship. We hit California, San Francisco, and you have it there? Yeah.
I'm wondering, how long did it take you to get back home from where you was at when you were serving?
About 3, I believe it was 3, 4 days. I met an army man, a captain. He was going overseas, and he found out he couldn't take his machine, his automobile over. And I won some money in coming home on a ship, on a crap game. I won $2,000, and I bought his car. He found out he couldn't take his car overseas. So I bought it for him for $1,500. And I drove from California all the way to Florida, to Arizona, what's the next nation after Washington? Washington, D.C. I'm forgetting things.
How were you received by your family and community when you returned home?
Oh, I received them well. and proud.
How did you adjust to the civilian life? How did you adjust yourself to the civilian life?
In life, well, I left, I hired out on the railroad, and my dad was alive, and I worked 1 week, and then they went out on strike. And my dad says, get yourself out of the mill and get yourself a job on the railroad, which I changed. I hired out on the railroad, but then it was everything was wrong. The engines, I had to shovel coal. I hired out as a fireman, and I used to operate the railroad from Chicago all the way to Fort Wayne, Indiana, 240 miles. When I arrived to Fort Wayne, Indiana, I had to look for a place to eat and a place to live on my own. My pay was $5.80 after 11 hours of working. But a dollar was a dollar then, back in them days.
Oh,
How
okay.
you
wasn't
remain
like-
in contact or reunited with fellow veterans? If so, who are they?
Right?
Yeah,
Have you remained in contact with or reunited?
yeah.
Have you remained in contact with or reunited with fellow veterans? If so, who?
Veterans, well,
Yeah,
my brothers were alive then. Charlie was the oldest. He was in the Army in World War II. Joe was second. He was in the Navy on a supply ship. Johnny died when he was 10 years old with diarrhea. And I was the youngest one. I'm Nicholas. And
Are you a member of any veterans organization? If so, which?
I joined the United States military veterans, but late, because I worked when I lost my job on the railroad. I mean on the steam engine and the steel and all. My dad was alive, and he told me, get yourself a job on the railroad. And I did. But everything was raw on the railroad. It was all steam engine. I had to shovel a lot of coal. I used to take trains from Chicago all the way to Fort Wayne, Indiana, 240 miles.
How did your military experience or your wartime affect your life?
My military experience?
How did your wartime or military experience affect your life?
Well, it affected me terribly, but I was happy that I came out of it alive, because I'd seen a lot of action in World War II. It's a miracle that I came out alive. I could tell you that. I could swear to that. Because I seen a lot of action in Europe and the Pacific. I don't know how in the world I survived. World War II claimed almost 40 million lives, mostly civilians, than military. There was cities, it became prairies from the bombing.
What were your life lessons you learned from the military service?
The life I learned from the military,
What are some life lessons you have learned since you have joined the military service?
well, I retired from the railroad. My dad was alive then, and he says, "Get yourself out of the mill," because I only worked a week in the mill, and then he went out on strike.
Dave, could you tell me again
So
what this process is?
I hired out on a railroad, but there was all steam engines. I had to shovel a lot of coal.
Doesn't this
I became
project?
a fireman on a railroad.
Yeah,
It was nothing at all for me to shovel tons of coal from Chicago to Fort Wayne, Indiana.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Military and civilian life?
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I was happy that when the war was over and became a civilian and I had a job. But there was 31 different railroad companies then when I hired out on the railroad. And I retired from the Norfolk and Southern for 38 years. I get my pension from the railroad retirement.
What message would you like to leave for a future generation who will view this interview?
Pardon?
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
Well, I have 2 daughters. I have 2 grandchildren. Whatever I have, I leave it to my grandchildren. I had a home, I sold it, and I gave half of the money to my daughter, my granddaughter, and half to my grandson, so they could get ahead in life.
Is there anything that we haven't, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to add to this interview?
Well, all I could say is that I really fought in World War II, and I'm lucky that I didn't get killed. Because I fought 2 years in Europe and 2 years in the Pacific. In the Pacific, I became an underwater demolition team. I swam in any harbors. Yes, that's my letter I got from the President of the United States.
In what year you received the letter from the President?
Well, it's right here. It says, no, it doesn't. Well, I got this letter. You know, I'm 92 years old. I'm forgetting things. I forgot a lot of things. I'm 92 years old, going on 93.
Would you like to read it out loud for us before we
Yeah.
closing up the interview?
Yes. This one here?
Yes.
Nicholas Aracolo, that's my name. To you who answered the call of your country and served in its armed forces to bring about the total defeat of the enemy, I extend the heartfelt thanks of a grateful nation. As some of the nation's finest, you undertook the most severe task one can be called upon to perform, because you demonstrated the fortitude, resourcefulness, and calm judgment necessary to carry out that task. We now look to you for leadership and example in further extending our country in peace. Harry S. Truman, signed, the White House.
Thank you. In closing, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to interview you and for participating in the Veterans History Project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.